So another round of voting has come and gone, and it's come and gone a lot faster than round 1 did for whatever reason. And the results are in, and you're looking at them right now. I put them next to the round 1 results just so that you can compare between the two, because there have been a few differences. Not major ones, because whatever was voted overused remained so, and what was voted uber remained so as well. And as was the case last time, red represents uber votes and green represents standard votes. So let's begin by taking a look at Latias, if you will. There's actually been sort of a difference. You can see that Uber has gotten a lot more votes this time around, though the explanation, well, it's just a theory since I'm not in the head of any of the voters, but I have a theory that's fairly simple, and it's that with Latios gone, Latias was used a lot more on the suspect ladder, and as a result we were more able to see how it could hold its own against the various threats that aren't there in standard right now. That is Garchomp and Manaphy. And we can't ignore the fact that Latias' use has risen significantly in standard in the last couple months. If I remember, it was number 2 for October, behind the lone Scizor, so yeah, you get the idea. And even though there's been a lot more support for Uber this time around, it was still a crushing victory for the standard proponents, and Latias will remain standard indefinitely. Next we got Garchomp, and it's another case where the fact that Latios was gone helped a lot with determine where it actually belonged, because Latios is probably one of the best counters for Garchomp out there, and as a result, once it was gone, there was a lot more reason to keep it in Ubers than to bring it back down to standard. I mean, Latias surely can hold its own against Garchomp as well, but not as successfully as Latios did because of the reduced offensive power. Nonetheless, it was quite a split decision, but you know the rules: 2 majority votes in a row or 1 supermajority, that is 60% or higher, and we just barely got 2 majority votes in a row thanks to the 3-vote majority in round 1, so Garchomp will remain Uber for at least another couple years. Personally, the impression I get from Garchomp is that it's the new Celebi, just barely Uber in its debut generation, but afterwards a solid choice in the overused environment. Of course, that is merely a prediction I'm making here, but I wouldn't be surprised if Garchomp was brought back down eventually during the next generation. And finally, we got Manaphy, and a change was long overdue in that department. I think I always thought it was sort of weird that Manaphy was claimed to be Uber without any sort of consensus, actually. So the round 1 voting we got was actually the first voting ever when it came to Manaphy. And so round 2 was going to give us even more insight into what Manaphy is actually capable of, and lo and behold, the standard option became even more popular for some reason. I don't have an idea why, of course, but nonetheless, it still proves that Manaphy without Kyogre simply doesn't have the power it needs in order to remain Uber. And by that I mean being banned in standard, because a lot of standard Pokemon are excellent in Ubers as well. I'm thinking of the likes of Scizor, for example. But anyway, Manaphy is going to be brought back down sometime in the next week or so, I imagine. On Shoddy, of course, those who battle using Wi-Fi don't need to pay attention to Shoddy updates, because they can just start using Manaphy immediately if they so desire. But nonetheless, I'm curious to see where it's going to lead the metagame. Are we going to see an increase in Rain Dance teams, Probably, but of course there's no perma-range, so Manaphy can't live up to the potential it had while in Ubers, and never really lived up to it because it has the same typing as Kyogre, and having two Pokemon with the same typing on the same team is usually a no-no. So where does that leave us? Well, now that every Pokemon has been sorted out successfully, it's time to take a look in Stage 4 at some rules that have been controversial ever since their inception. Well, and to be honest, those are the three rules you're seeing right now: Species Clause, the one-hit KO ban, and Evasion ban. And quite frankly, I am praying that we get the status quo in this department. Because Species Clause, if you think about it, well, usually it's not going to be much of a problem, but in some cases, especially Pokemon with wide move pools, such as Lucario, for example, it can be quite cheap. So for example, let's say you got, for example, a Choice Band Lucario and a Choice Specs Lucario. You could bring in the Choice Band user early in the match, and then your opponent is going to think, okay, his Lucario is physical, but then later in the match you send in your other Lucario, and your opponent, thinking is the physical one, is going to bring in a physical wall, like, I don't know, Gliscor, provided it doesn't have Ice Punch, of course. But it's the Choice Specs Lucario, and your opponent is caught with his pants down. And personally, I think this is not a very good idea, because I think it induces too much of an element of dumb luck and downplays predicting and knowing your opponent's team as an essential part of Pokemon battling skill. And speaking of dumb luck, they're also going to take a look at the ban on one-hit KO and evasion moves, and personally, I don't think the problem with those moves is that they're broken. It's that, as I said, it transforms the game into too much of a game of luck. Of course, I'm okay with the occasional hacks, like we're seeing right now, but allowing those moves just would make the game way too reliant on hacks. And that's why I'm personally hoping that there's no change when it comes to those three rules. But meanwhile, there's a rule that I wouldn't really mind seeing go away. And I'm talking about Freeze Clause. You know, for all the times that you get to freeze two different opponents on the opponent's team, honestly, it rarely happens as is that you get to freeze one of them, but two of them, well, I'll be honest, there's no way to enforce a freeze clause on Wi-Fi, and I don't think anyone who battles over Wi-Fi actually cares, because the only way to freeze someone is through random hacks on Ice Beam or Blizzard. Now sleep is a whole other ball game. You can't hack someone to sleep, but you really have to use a move like Hypnosis or Sleep Powder in order to put someone to sleep. And so, with their high accuracy, I can understand, wanting to keep Sleep Clause on at all costs. Of course, there's the problem of it not being enabled over Wi-Fi either, so you have to abide by a code of honor, and some people, as I've learned in the world, don't really have a lot of honor, so I guess only battle people you know on Wi-Fi. But for Shoddy, I mean, Freeze Clause, I wouldn't mind seeing it go away, but those three, please don't touch them. So those were my thoughts on the present and future of the game of Pokemon. I hope you enjoyed my rant, and have a good day.